The Marching Roundtable is proud to be an official media partner of Drum Corps International.
Thanks for coming to the Marching Roundtable YouTube channel, sharing great information to help you succeed in all the marching arts. While you're here, we hope you'll subscribe.
Well, I remember being very excited about the idea of not using props and the idea of Vagabond having everything that they need on their back and not having a place to go, that the world is their oyster, they're constantly on the move, was really important to not have props because they're always going someplace different. I think Vagabond is a concept that everyone can relate to. It's a concept that the performers can certainly relate to because they drop everything to pack up for the summer and have everything with them going from place to place. And so our version of Vagabond is more timeless. It's not set in any particular time or place, and not having the props on the field allows us to change the environment at the drop of a hat.
I remember he played that for me, and I said, like, what was that? You know, and I had him play it for me again, and he opened my mind up to a lot of these, especially Kendrick Lamar. There was several other people like that, but I remember thinking about our connection to our members and our connection to the style of music that we play. I think is a real real window to let people in, and I think it's kind of high time that we did something like this. I think a lot of people haven't done something like this because the nature of the music is a little bit repetitive, and it doesn't last like a full production's length. And so it was really great when I sort of pitched this tune. Everybody on this call and then some were really supportive of it, of going in that direction.
Greetings from DCI. This is Drum Corps International staff wishing Marching Roundtable and Tim Hinton the very, very best on your 1,000th episode. We're so grateful for everything that you have done for marching arts all around the world. Keep up the great work. Congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Everybody, welcome to the Marching Roundtable podcast. This is Tim Hinton, the beast of the marching arts. We're talking Santa Clara today, and first off, we are so excited Santa Clara is back with us on the field this year. Everybody is very, very happy to see that. Let me tell you who's on the line today. Daniel Morrison is here, the program coordinator. Daniel, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for being here. Michael Gaines, the visual designer, is with us. Michael, how are you doing?
Hey, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so glad you're here. Evan VanDoren, the brass arranger, is with us. Evan, how are you today?
I'm well, Tim. Great to be here.
And next up, Paul Rennick, the percussion caption manager, percussion arranger, and music coordinator. Paul, how are you?
Glad to be here.
Nice. So glad you're here. You always have the best hair at DCI, so it's good to see your awesome hair on the line again. That's just for me because I've just sort of shaved all mine off recently and gave up. So anyway, so glad that you're here. And Andy Toth is with us, the visual designer and coordinator. Andy, how are you?
Hello, thank you for having us, and thanks everyone for watching.
Absolutely. So everybody, we're going to dig into this show, Vagabond. Everybody is leaning in. I think it's really interesting. Obviously, there's no props, and people are talking about that. What does the show mean? What are all the layers that they have put into the show? I think there's a lot going on. I will tell everybody I've only seen this on video so far, so I feel like I'm a little bit of a deficit, but I'm going to ask some questions as the viewer. And I want to start that's again just saying we're so happy that the Corps is back on the field. And Daniel, as program coordinator, let me just start with you. How do you feel like the season's going?
I mean, I think the season's going fantastic. I mean, coming in as a newcomer, it's been really exciting because the entire design team stayed together. So much of the staff stayed together. I think it's a true testament to the power of the organization. And just to be a small part of what's going on has been just kind of surreal, to be honest. So as the season has started and we're hitting the ground running, I can't even explain the excitement that I'm feeling personally to be part of this. And I think we're all really obviously glad to be back. Glad to have so many incredible, excited members bringing this show to life. And I'm excited for this team to have the chance to talk more in depth about what everyone's seeing and hearing on the field this year.
So I would like somebody to jump in and tell us where this idea for Vagabond as a concept came from. I threw that out in general. That probably wasn't very fair.
I feel like I mean, I think correct me if I'm wrong, everybody, but it seems like the starting point was Paul bringing the Kendrick Lamar tune to the table, and then we sort of like grew to this idea from there. Is that how everybody else remembers it? That's how I remember it.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. We have kids. My wife Sandy and I have kids, and my son is into contemporary music like rap and hip hop, and a lot of it is really repetitive. But he played a couple of things for me from Kendrick Lamar, which previously I didn't know before last year, and just it's really much more like thoroughly composed and much more sophisticated in terms of just basic material. And I remember he played that for me, and I said, like, what was that? And I had him play it for me again, and he opened my mind up to a lot of these, especially Kendrick Lamar. There was several other people like that, but I remember thinking about our connection to our members and our connection to the style of music that we play. I think is a real window to let people in, and I think it's kind of high time that we did something like this. I think a lot of people haven't done something like this because the nature of the music is a little bit repetitive, and it doesn't last like a full production's length. And so it was really great when I sort of pitched this tune. Everybody on this call and then some were really supportive of it, of going in that direction. And I think it's been terrific. And Evan has found, especially Evan and all the percussion music with my wife Sandy and Dave Isaac, the sound designer, have just like taken these nuggets from the fundamental pieces called United in Grief, and we've taken all these nuggets that were really terrific, like music motifs, music themes throughout the show. We wove them throughout the entire show, in sometimes a really overt way and sometimes a really hidden way. And it's proved to really last the whole show in terms of just content of material that we chose from. That's one of 4 productions that we're tapping for source material. And I think that our process is I know that Andy and Mike and Michael Rosales like to hear something. They want to hear like, okay, what are we thinking? Let's put it out there and let's try to hear it. And it usually generates a lot of extremely creative ideas in terms of just the way that you can interpret it. Because I think it's fair to say, like Evan, myself, Sandy, and Dave think really musically. I mean, we obviously have been doing this for a long time, so it's not only musically, but primarily we just want to make sure that the music has enough substance to last the entire show. Instead of having just really snippets of quotes of it, it really does last a long time. And I think after that meeting in Dallas, I think the visual team really communicated on their own and really tried to figure out, okay, what was this? How could we interpret this? What would this mean? And I think I remember Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Vagabond idea came up pretty early. And I think it really resonates with a lot of us who've been doing drum corps for a long time. It's a hard to describe concept, but capsulated in that word or in that concept that we're putting out there. And it's honestly generated a lot of really creative ideas. So.
Yeah, we had actually discussed just the overall concept of Vagabond a couple of other times over the last number of years, but it just never was a perfect fit. And then once we started hearing some of the music being brought to the table, the United in Grief, etc., there just seemed to be that perfect marriage, that moment that was like, oh, that works so well together. And so from there, we kind of started fleshing out that whole concept.
Well, Andy, once you get to that point, then how do you figure out how are you going to portray this idea?
Well, I remember being very excited about the idea of not using props and the idea of Vagabond having everything that they need on their back and not having a place to go, that the world is their oyster, they're constantly on the move, was really important to not have props because they're always going someplace different. I think Vagabond is a concept that everyone can relate to. It's a concept that the performers can certainly relate to because they drop everything to pack up for the summer and have everything with them going from place to place. And so our version of Vagabond is more timeless. It's not set in any particular time or place, and not having the props on the field allows us to change the environment at the drop of a hat, using the performers only and using the colors in the costume to change the textures and the environments on the field. So I remember being super excited about the idea of like, okay, great, we don't have to use these tools to block us into a corner. And it's also something that we don't have to use to move around on the field and take the performers out of the performance to move the props around. So that was super exciting for me. And then the idea of, well, what does a vagabond look like? A vagabond has shelter, has a hood that they could protect themselves, and then they have everything that they need that they can carry with them. So the idea of the backpacks came out as a tool for, well, how are we going to get equipment to the color guard without having them evacuate the field, go to the sidelines, come back on, or without having people stand and deliver the equipment to them? Why not have it on their backs? And so the rifles and sabers, and even one of the flags, come from the backs of the brass. And it's been a huge undertaking in planning. And there's all sorts of charts and everything that lets us know who needs what and where. And it just makes it so obvious how important each of the performers are to the performance, because they can't do the performance without each other.
So Michael, that makes me want to ask you something, which is, as a designer, it can be helpful to have constraints like a prop I have to work around, and it helps to motivate me how to know how to write. Was it intimidating that anything could happen and that you had the whole field, or was that like very freeing?
It was not intimidating.
I'm asking Michael Gaines if he's intimidated about writing drills, so that seems kind of ridiculous. But
no, it's a great question, because obviously a blank page or a canvas is intimidating to any designer. Throwing that first splash of paint or a first dot on the page is not my favorite thing to do, and I do get stressed about it. So I think it's totally a fair question. Relative to having set piece props, this is another one of those things we had actually discussed, I think, before what would have been the 2023 season, before the organization shut down operations. We had discussed maybe kind of taking a different path than most and going without set pieces or props. Just, we certainly are not anti-prop, clearly. I mean, we've used them to great success. I've only been here since 2017, but I think even before that. But we used the Ouroboros, the wheel props that were fantastic. Babylon, we had the modular cages that started as one and then broke apart and kept breaking throughout the show. Going on through 19 and 22, also had significant real estate covered with these large props, and we really enjoyed creating with those. But as time went by, it started feeling a little bit like the modular prop concept was being used by so many different groups, whether it was in the band world or Winter Guard or drum corps, and we had already done it, arguably or not arguably to success. And so, just being who these people are on the design team, we like to look for a new path forward. And ironically, the new path forward was no props, which is where the activity originally came from. So, and it is freeing in that, when I personally am going through the design process, when we had the larger props in other shows, it wasn't only what kind of scene do we want to create, it was also always who's not playing that can move these props, right? And that's just this anchor on your back, trying to figure out, you don't have a lot of freedom, because you're like, okay, I guess it's the mellophone's turn, or God love the cymbals. I was not always their favorite person a couple of those years. Sorry, Paul. You have to rearrange the furniture. So that part of it is taken off. But what's put on, as Andy alluded to, is the idea that we have spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet of all the performers in the Corps at every page of drill and who has what in their backpack, so that I would know moving forward as I was writing, okay, we've got to get 8 rifles now. Who has the rifles? Where are they on the field? How do we get them? Or do we need to add some, et cetera? But it was a challenge, but it was a welcome challenge because it was a different type of challenge than we've had in the past, and really, I think quite innovative. I mean, not a lot of people in at least recent history or any history have utilized the brass as a place to retrieve equipment. Usually, it's either behind a prop, behind the pit, on the back sideline, in the end zones, which could have been a vulnerability. Not using set pieces, competitively, because that's low-hanging fruit for a judge to say, oh, we are all running over to the sideline to get your equipment and coming back on. It's an easy little tick, even though we don't use the tick system in theory. So that was, what's that?
And we all know what you mean by that exactly. Yeah, you're absolutely. Oh, the transition problem, right? That's
Yeah, it's just an easy thing to call out, and legitimately so. I mean, it certainly is something that is part of the criteria. So that made me a little bit nervous initially, and then when the team, I don't even remember who originally came up with the backpack idea, either Andy, Michael Rosales, which by the way, Michael Rosales really wanted to be here, but he couldn't be here today. But he's an integral part of our team and designed all the costumes and choreography. But when the idea of the backpack came up, that was just another one of those aha moments that was like everything was just working so well together with the music and the lyrics and the idea of the Vagabond, and then the backpack just clicked right into that as well. And the byproduct of that is we saved a lot of money just for the set pieces and the trucks, et cetera, which helps the organization coming out of a financial crisis. The other byproduct of that is that the members have a much, I guess I'll use the word better experience, because they don't have to, at the end of a rehearsal, tear down props, load them on the truck, and take up all the time that that it takes to do all of that. And then, also in a year where, because we are just coming back, DCI requires us to go on before the rooster crows at some point, and so we don't have as much rehearsal time as maybe we would have had in other years. So that also allowed us to have that extra time where they're not loading props. And just overall, just everything has been a much better experience.
Well, that was one of my questions, was clearly if you're not having to deal with props, you save a lot of time on all kinds of layers, because certainly even during rehearsal, let's reset to chart whatever, and you have to schlep stuff around. So I'm wondering if this makes you guys really nimble and getting a lot more time, like you said, to rehearse and not having to take time to take stuff apart. Like, it seems like there's a lot of time savings.
A lot.
I'll just add one comment. I was actually going to say, before you said that, you don't realize how complicated it is and how good of a job that the visual designers have done until you start resetting things. Like, you're rehearsing. Like, I was just at rehearsal, and it's, if you want to go from this set to this set and rehearse that, it's like a Sudoku puzzle. I mean, you have to figure out, and we have to rewrap things and put them in the right backpacks, and then just to reset and rehearse. So it saves an enormous amount of time, but in rehearsals, you definitely have an appreciation for how complicated it can be.
And once, if just one person is missing, obviously that's why we have all those spreadsheets. So on a dime, in warm up, if someone, for whatever reason feels ill and so they can't perform, immediately you go to spreadsheets. Where are they? Who gets equipment out of their backpack? Who's around them that could do that? So there's all those instantaneous changes that have to happen on a dime. But I think our staff is great, and they are well versed in how to make things work.
So I have one other I'm sorry, Andy, I have one other really geeky question about this, but Andy, remember what you were going to say, okay? Michael, I'm wondering, as a drill designer, is it more worrisome to figure out how you're going to get something or how you're going to get rid of something, or is it both? Like with the backpack, making things appear or disappear? Because once you get rid of something, you have to keep track of it. My head hurts just thinking about how you did this.
I think that's a good question. I think that it's probably probably pretty equal. I think the dealing with flags is obviously a little bit more a little trickier, just because of the size, and not all of them can fit in the backpack, other than the huge, ballad flag. So there were some things we had to do, but other than that, when it came to the weapons, I think it was pretty equally tricky, trying to find out who has them and where to get rid of them. Actually, I'll backtrack. Where to get rid of them generally was a function of who were they around, because everyone has a backpack, with the exception of, I think, the battery percussion. So yeah, I'm gonna walk back that, Tim, and say it's a lot trickier.
Assuming that it's going away and not coming back.
That's true. Yeah, then it's the coming back part again. That's trickier. But, it's one of those things that, as long as we've all been doing this, it's a new, creative, innovative way to do equipment changes that, and that kind of thing excites us. Anything that's new, again, given how long all of us have been doing this, finding those magical things to keep the excitement and inspiration going is just a great thing.
Yeah, I love it. So Andy, what were you going to say before I cut you off? I apologize.
Oh, I was just thinking that although the idea of the backpack was a little bit intimidating at first, knowing that it was part of the concept, and the concept of the backpack was driving why we're doing it, was super helpful, because Vagabond has everything they need on their back. They travel and they share ideas, they share experiences. And so the offering of a rifle, hi everyone, this is a rifle, we're going to show you what rifle is, and then everyone learns rifle in that moment. And then our Vagabond character will go over and get a saber and say, here everyone, this is a saber offering. And that's part of the storytelling of Vagabond. So I don't know that the backpack idea would necessarily work with any other show, with any other concept, because it's so driven. The backpacks are so driven by the concept, and it just so happens that they're super functional and super innovative in how we change the whole layout of the show. So that part was really inspiring.
Okay, that's very cool.
One thing too, because I think one of my biggest jobs is to be the cheerleader for the brilliant people on this team that are very humble. But the way that Michael was able to design the drill with these backpacks without anything to reference or having never seen anything done like that before, it is so elegantly designed that you almost don't even notice that there's literally no transitions. It's like I've joked with Evan, like maybe one of them should be a little bit kind of rough. So like, oh wow, they're doing these transitions with backpacks, because you notice it is so well designed into the fabric of the program. It's like so elegant and effortless that you almost have to look to even notice that it's happening. It's inspiring. It's incredible, and I don't know how he did it, truly.
Well, and of course, that's the big ridiculousness of writing beautiful transitions, is that no one notices your work, and that's when you've done it right.
Yes.
Like Michael, that's one of the thankless things of being a great drill writer, is that people don't notice when you've done these brilliant things.
Yeah, I mean, it can be that way, but and thank you for saying such kind things. But to be honest, a lot of it also is what Andy, Michael, Katie, all of our choreographers have been able to do, in terms of the vertical orchestration of things. So it's not just the placement and orchestration geographically on the field, but also the vertical composition and knowing when we want to show that we're actually doing this and when we want to hide those kind of things. So, working with both horizontally and vertically is part of that process as well. And we just I can't say enough good things about our choreographers and the work that they've done this year. And that's one of the highlights of the show to me, is how much complexity and expression of movement we have throughout that we can have, because we're not constantly interrupted, by, okay, these 4 people have to, push. I've used the example in the past about I'm always so jealous of whenever I'm in the theater. Maybe I'm angry. I get angry when I'm in the theater, because you'll watch a show and the soloist just sinks into the ground while the next person comes in, And I'm like, no, we don't have that opportunity. The lights go down, everyone rearranges the furniture, the lights come up, it's magically different. We don't have that opportunity, which is why I truly believe there's some designers in this activity that are way better at that craft than people you would see in the theater, because they don't have those, and I know it's not fair to call them cheating, because I would totally use them if I could. But those devices that they have, if we could turn out the stadium lights to pitch black and rearrange the core, and I'll bring them back on, and there they are, that would be awesome, but we can't do that, right? So, some of that is why, after a number of years of doing the modular props, it just started to kind of, I don't know, tug at me a little bit as to that suspension of disbelief that we as an activity have about pay no attention to the 16 people moving the 4 large props around. That's exactly what I wanted those performers to do in this moment. Yeah, and it has to be done, right? We did it, so I'm definitely not slinging anything at anyone else. We did it for a number of years. That's why, we were just ready to kind of move on and try something else. Doesn't mean we won't use set pieces in the future. It's going to depend on the show, but compositionally, it's just been such a joy to create in this way.
So one could also extrapolate that the demand on the performer is greater because they never have a moment off from beginning to end. Would that be fair to say?
More than
100%.
Yeah.
More than fair, Paul? Is that what you said? I mean, seriously, there's never, I can take a break and go behind a prop. I can't do that.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like there's no intermission for us. You're always out there. You can't take a break and collect yourself and then come out fresh. And yeah, you're always on stage completely. It's a good challenge though. I think that players like to play. They like to be out there. They like to be seen performing. So I think it's all a good thing. I would say, adding to the comments about transitions, and Evan will probably agree with this, a lot of the transitions in the past have at least included some request of like, okay, we have to do this, we have to get from here to here, and these things have to, they take this amount of time to do this. So like a lot of transitions have been dictated by that kind of parameter. But I would say this year it's all been musical. It's like I just added a couple of counts yesterday just because it felt musically better to do that. And it wasn't a utilitarian thing at all. It was like all the transitions we write are like purely musical transitions. And it works perfectly because there's no obligation to get something someplace. And Evan, I'm sure you would probably agree with that. Like,
Evan, how does that impact your writing?
I like that.
Well, just like I think, just like Michael was saying, how it was somewhat freeing to have this sort of blank canvas, and it came with challenges, sure, but there was a freedom in it that was somewhat liberating. I felt the same way because there were very few constraints for me on the front end having to think about those things. So I love that, and I agree with everything that Paul and everyone else has said so far on the subject.
The amount of logistical cheats that props have allowed us in the past, for all of their challenges, they also allowed, this particular harmonica soloist isn't cutting it anymore. Let's take them behind the prop and switch them with this person, and they'll switch drill spots, but you'll never see it because they're hidden behind the prop. We need to switch to two of the sabers onto rifle. Just have them hide behind this prop until the drill can pick them up, and then boom, they can come back out. And we certainly enjoyed the benefits of those set pieces in the past. We don't have that luxury with this show. So the luxuries we've been given with this show, there are also more challenges where, as you alluded to, every performer is always in the spotlight 100% of the time, which is fantastic for the performers. Adds some challenges and pre-planning on our end from a design standpoint to make sure things are going to work as intended without having to do those kind of things.
So Andy, I'd like to ask you a question because I, unfortunately, as I mentioned, have only seen this on video, watched several different perspectives, trying to see what I can. But I would like to hear a little bit more about what the sections of the show are and what you're talking about during them, because like there's this person in yellow, right? And I don't know who they are from my viewing. So could you tell me about that, or maybe how that falls into the story?
Sure. The beginning of the show, part one of the show, we see a lot of individuals on the field, and it gives the vibe of individuality. And there's a slow motion step that's taken. It's super cautious, but it's curious. And when thinking about the vagabond taking a step onto the road and making a decision to set out, not knowing where they're going, but having the intuition and having that conscience guiding them, this is where we introduce the sort of spirit of the vagabond in all of us, which is our performer that has yellow. It's like a light shining down on them. So at the very beginning, you see this something in the distance, whether that's a person or a star in the sky or something that you feel inside, you see it in the distance. And at the start of the show, we see that performer come to life and is spotlit, if I can say that, across the field. And gradually, all of the individuals become one flat line of this bold, confident step forward that everyone on the field has decided to take, which is to set out on the road. Whether that be out of curiosity, of courage, wanderlust, whatever it is, that person that we see in the beginning is more of our intuition, our conscience, or our guiding star for part one. And musically, at the very beginning of the show, we start right off with the Kendrick Lamar phrase, "I hope you find some peace of mind in this lifetime." And that phrase serves as a mantra, really, for the vagabond. It's something that you would wake up every morning and say, I'm going to set out, I'm going to find the thing that I'm looking for, and share that. And Evan, you can talk a little bit more, I'm sure, about how often we hear this throughout the show, and it's like that mantra coming back to us.
Yeah, that theme, you hear it right away, and we use it to identify our vagabond throughout the entire show. So it's sort of like, how did I describe it the other day? Sort of like those children's book where you turn the page and you hear the pixie dust happen, right? So like it sort of is the bookmark to go, now we're called to the next chapter. Now we're called to the next place. Now the vagabond comes over to this new community. So if you pay attention, I mean, like Paul was saying, it's really woven in a lot of subtle ways through the program. But there are a few key obvious statements. One of them, clearly the very first thing we do, where it's literally Kendrick singing this line. But you hear a soloist over here singing it, and that sort of leads us to the next place the vagabond goes. We've introduced Rifle. Rifle has been shared with our community. Then we hear it again, and it calls us to share Saber the next time, and so on and so forth. So if you listen for it, it's always sort of that calling card of, now the vagabond is being called to the next place.
And having our vagabond in yellow just offers the audience a little bit more, okay, we can follow this now, and having that light shine down. So moving on into the second part of the show, part two, that's when we start pulling the equipment out of the backpacks. And Vagabond now has a rifle and says, here's a rifle. Just like anyone, if you meet anyone in the street, you learn something about them. You have shared experiences. And so that rifle now is what's shared with the baritone voice. Our Vagabond travels across the field, gets a saber, and shares the saber voice with a new group of people. And does the same thing with the flag. And the flag design has a fire design to it, because oftentimes if you're on the road at the end of the night, you'll sit around a campfire and you'll share stories. So this is where we get a lot of our information about starting off as an individual and then joining communities. It's through shared experiences around these campfires. And you see those three circles come together, these three communities come together, and it turns into a big celebration of conversation. Even the music changes right after that, where the instruments actually mix together. We're not in baritones, mellophones, tubas anymore. We're actually mixed together. So the conversation is happening musically, and it's also being shared with the visual elements as well, with the guard elements. And that sort of wraps up our big part two, which is getting everyone together. And once we get everyone together, it moves into something much more cool. It's kind of like after, I imagine, I remember being a performer and being, super competitive at one point, but then after the fact, my best friends were in other drum course also. So you would have that time after the show to support each other and be like, show me what you did. Show me what you did. Wow, you're really good at that. And having that trombone feel and that like super cool, chill vibe there in part 3, so different than what part 2 is. That's our sort of after hours time period where we're now dancing around the fire together. We're no longer competitive or learning about each other, but we're celebrating what we've learned.
And the concept of the vagabond, like that person, that concept of who that person is makes that possible, which is something we all need to be thinking a lot more about right now. So I like that a lot. That's nice.
He just sort of represents that what we have in all of us. I think everyone can remember being walking into a room for the first time, whether it be a class that you're taking or you're walking into a new sports program or something like that, and not really knowing anyone, but having that like, okay, I'm gonna feel confident now. I'm gonna step in. That the person in yellow is sort of the spirit of all of that coming together and saying, you know what, I can talk to these people. I can be vulnerable in this moment and then learn something from them. And I think all of that really comes to fruition in the second half of the program, where once we've all had a great time in part 3, there's a little bit of conflict because the vagabond person now meets up with another person. And now there's interaction between 2 people. And rather than it being an aggressive conflict or a love story, it's almost like looking down into the water at your reflection or looking at your reflection and having it move away and then you see something else. It's almost this idea of, I've used the idea of Simba and Mufasa, where this idea of the intuition comes into your mind and you're sort of questioning it. You're a little bit cautious. And so the angst that comes with part 4 and one person being sucked in and very trapped in this space, very, very defined space, dense space, and you still have Vagabond, which is that intuition, that guiding light off in the distance. They end up coming back together again. So part 4 happens in a moment's notice. If this were a film, this would be the blink of an eye. But we carry it out through about a minute's worth of show. And when they come back together, when we get into the 5th portion of the show, and we play mirror ball, it's this moment of aha, this wonderment, this awe. If you're traveling and you look up to the sky and you take a moment to take everything in, you realize how small you are. And you realize how much of a big part you are to everything else. And so when you see the vagabond go off in the distance and then this one soloist with the French horn, they're realizing their potential at that point. And as they meet up again, you see the flags come out. The flags have a profile of the face and you see a beautiful starry sky that moves to the back of the field and becomes the set at that point. It becomes the all-seeing sky that we call it, because that's another song that we play. But it's also mirror ball, where you look up in the sky and you see stars and the reflections of yourself and the people that came before you. And so there's that moment where Vagabond gives the yellow cloak over to the next person, the next generation. And all of part 6 is that joy in understanding how big you are in this world. And it's really a sense of gratitude. And when we end the show, that person goes off and then becomes part of the sky again. There's an empty spot in the design of where the flags are left. And even the color spectrum goes from blue through warm colors, and it ends with that yellow at the end, which could be a star in the sky, intuition, could be lots of things. And then the cycle can repeat itself.
Very interesting. So I appreciate you explaining all that, because I will watch the show differently the next time, understanding this. So that's one of the reasons I'm glad we're having this conversation.
And thank you for listening. I mean, and all that to say that that's not only it. That is a version that you could take away from it. It's part of why I love working with this design team is that we get inspired by something. You know, it's inspiration, not exploitation. We don't take something that exists and put it on the football field. There's a lot of input that comes from different inspirations that go into what becomes a new idea for the performers, and then the performers integrate themselves into it too, and just becomes a whole new experience. I'm so lucky.
Yeah, and what you're describing, I think, is so cool is that it's wonderful for you guys to have that all fleshed out. This was the way the story you're telling, and I may not understand all of that, but I'm going to understand that there's intention and thought there, and then I can make my own interpretation that means something to me. But knowing that you have your thought out version makes that possible for me to then have mine.
You know, musically too, honestly, the choices of what to play are oftentimes, there's a good example on our show. There's the choices of what to play are oftentimes dictated by the concept, and you know, it's great to listen to Andy say that, because it generates and unifies the concept for the entire show from the beginning to the end. And it's not, we can't just put any music in there. I remember we were listening to Mirrorball for years before we actually, you know, and in the right moment in the show, I pressed play, and I think it was Dan and Evan both said, yeah, that actually does capture the spirit of what we're doing. So it's really well thought out in terms of, we don't just find the next tune that we can just put in there. One of the things that's really great about the Kendrick Lamar stuff is its inherent use of sound design. I think, like, if we're playing Tchaikovsky and we need to sound design and create a soundscape behind that, it's by definition, it's kind of contrived, right? It doesn't inherently exist in the piece, and I think the Kendrick Lamar does, and I think it's really clever. Like, we actually start with a verbatim quote of the tune, and it fits perfectly. And it was funny, the first time we did a performance, as soon as we did that the audience was an entire student audience. One of our first shows was in Walnut, California, and everybody was a student. And as soon as they heard that, the place just erupted. I mean, it just connects with the generation right now, and it just allows us to sound design like in a natural way, because it already fits with the music. And you know, the concept of the way that Andy just put is way smoother than way I'm going to say right now. But like, the individual meets other individuals, and they create groups of people, and then the groups meet other groups of people, and then that's the way the entire beginning of the show starts, right? There's pods of people, of individuals playing. There's three, you know, there's 5 percussionists, 5 or 6 percussionists in each pod, and all of them are playing a different part. And then they're just talking to each other and playing a different part, and then the next pod comes in and they're saying something different, and then the third part is a combination of those pods, and they form a group, and then that group bleeds into the entire core, becomes a unified group of a community that makes that first statement. I think that's why it actually really works, is because it sticks to that concept, and it really, whether you know it or not, like you were saying, whether you're totally on the inside in terms of knowing that, it still makes sense to you. There's an inherent logic to the way it's put together.
Yeah, what you just described seems to me to be like a percussion writer's dream too. Like, that had to be so much fun. You know what I mean? You just got all these little groups, and they're all playing different things, and they come together. Like, that just sounds like drum guys would totally, like, that just had to be really fun. I'm not a percussionist, so I hope that's not offensive, but it just sounds like a little math puzzle for drummers that would be really super fun.
Yeah, the best part about the shows that we've designed is that they stay interesting the whole summer. There's a depth to them and layers of interest that make it last the test of time, honestly. It's like, you know, we've all had years where, you know, you kind of get tired of hearing the same music. I don't really, honestly, I am not tired of it. I enjoy it every time I listen to it. I think it's really fresh, because there's always something to look at or something to hear that is surprising, like a little nuance, like just when you thought you heard it all, then all of a sudden the little sound design of an echo of the theme kind of is hidden in that transition. You think, oh wow, it connects with you as an audience member. It makes you feel smarter, like you understand what's going on because of that unifying element.
Yeah, and those layers that are in your show makes it all fun also to see the show over and over. And as you said, feel smart as you realize more and more as you're watching. Daniel, I cut you off as you were going to say something. Please jump in.
Oh, it's okay. It's actually what Paul just said was tied into exactly what I was going to say. Is one of my favorite things musically about the show are those really nuanced moments and little transitions that if you're paying attention, they're why you get invested emotionally into what's happening. Like there's this like 5-note bell transition that takes you into the last part of the show that's just like very subtle, and it's a version of the Kendrick Lamar theme, but you hear it and it kind of just it gets inside you in a way that's like you feel like even if you had never heard this Kendrick Lamar song before you saw the show, you feel like you knew the song your whole life because of all of the different ways and the permutations that Paul and Evan and Sandy and Dave figured out how to build in so seamlessly that you don't really realize it's happening to you until you get to the end of the show and you get the big final push of like the more major iteration of this Kendrick Lamar thing, and you get this payoff and you realize little by little you've been getting reeled into this emotional journey musically that just pays off in such an over-the-top way. And every time I watch the show, I hear a different little nugget that's been built into it that just, like I said, it kind of gets into your soul and stays there. And you get the little nuance, you get the understated moment, but then you get the over-the-top that just, it's why we love this activity. It's what makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. It's not just the loud stuff, it's all the things in between that build into those moments that really do just like put it over the top. So to me, like musically, that's what I get super excited about is how, I don't know how they come up with all these things, but I hear them and I'm like, that's it. That's why they're the best at what they do.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so I did come in with one question also as a viewer that I would like to ask, and that is, I'm interested in the choice of the colors with the red and the blue. I understand now the yellow with the spotlight, so thank you for explaining that. Can anybody explain to me why those choices were made and if that has any certain meaning for the Vagabond theme? Or did you just like the colors? And
Well, first, we know that we have a blank canvas every year, that the options are unlimited. And I think that this team, to my knowledge, has not worked with those colors before. And we knew that we wanted to work with something different and something that contrasted each other well. There's lots of references. We were inspired by a fashion show from Ferrari earlier this season that went into the design of the silhouette. And it just so happened to be this royal blue and this crimson color. There's also a reference to the red and the blue in poetry that we've been inspired by called The Vagabond by Stevenson, and references the red, the fire red and the blue sky. And to me, that also references the all-seeing sky and the campfire idea. So there's so many versions that not even versions, but there's so much inspiration that comes from it, and it comes from a lot of different places. It's not specific to because of this one thing or that thing, but we've been inspired in a lot of different ways.
Cool, thank you.
One of the best moments of the show, honestly, is the it's striking when you see the core just stand there. It's really like it's engaging in terms of just the color choice, but then the reveal of the flags that happen in the middle of the show are so surprising and so I don't know how else to describe it. It's so refreshing when that finally happens up. This splash of color like covers the whole field, and it's really dramatic. And I think it was funny. We had a show where one of the judges was kind of questioning, yeah, we really need some color here, and then just at that moment, like right after he was kind of saying that, the release of the color happened, and it kind of was like, oh my goodness, it was like really effective because it's didn't see it coming at all, and then it just wait the perfect amount of time in the show, and then all of a sudden it happens. It's terrific.
That sounds incredibly gratifying when somebody reacts exactly as and you give it to them right when they want it. That's awesome. I love that.
The color of the drums too is funny. Like that Ferrari fashion show. I just immediately thought, wouldn't it be cool if we were all driving Ferraris out there? And then I just found out the paint color for the Ferraris. Talked to the manufacturer and said, I wonder if it's possible to make these like monochromatic, like Ferrari red. And all of the percussion stuff is we kind of get rid of all the metal and the chrome, because I think there was a comment before about the props being sort of raw aluminum, and it seemed similar, like for a lot of people. And so we just kind of got rid of all of that, and it's all, every chromed part of the drums is all like anodized red now, and it's all that same Ferrari red as the color guard has. So it's really, I think that monochromatic look is really cool. It creates an interesting sort of thing. Just standing there, it looks great.
Cool. So is there anything else about the show that we wanted to mention or talk about before we start to wrap this up?
I think it can't be understated. No. It can't be overstated how much the cast of 2024 contributes to the show, and how much their passion and buy-in has allowed the show to succeed. Coming into this season, there were so many unknowns. We didn't know what would happen after being gone for a year, what kind of experience level we would have with the performers. And they've really, even since the audition camps, we've been so pleasantly surprised by not only the experience level and the ability level, but also just the energy is so great on all levels. The organization right now just feels so good on all levels, from the executive level, the board level, the staff, the students. This team here, Dan has brought such an incredible magical energy to this team. I can't say enough about it. His skills and his leadership, and just being the guy he is, just everywhere in this organization. I guess what I'm saying is the state of the organization is strong.
Amen.
Yeah, I agree. And if anybody hasn't heard it, I had a podcast conversation with Russ Gavin about shoring up the organization and looking toward the future, and that was really inspiring to me to talk to him about that. And Michael, I would say that the fact that you guys stayed together as the team and brought the fact that you guys were solid and you're still there when the core came back, I feel like was very important and powerful in making this all happen that you just described, because people could trust to return and feel like they were in good hands. And so my hats off to all of you for making that happen and being here right now, still leading the core. Yeah, I think that's really commendable, and I think it's super important to why Santa Clara is in such great hands. We all expected it, but everybody is super happy. Come on, Santa Clara is one of those cores that it's been around forever, and we all love it. It's just in the DNA, Yeah. And we all love this. We all love a lot of different cores, but I think we're all really happy. And thank you for describing all this. I am really happy to learn all this. As a drum corps fan, I'm now looking forward to watching the show again with this information, and watching all these layers and levels and pieces of content and complexities play out. And I really would love to play with one of these backpacks. How far do I have to reach in? It's my last question. How far do I have to reach in to get a rifle? Are they super deep? Do I have to put my whole arm in there? Or is it really how hard is that? It's just right there. How does it not fall all the way down in there or something?
Well, it's like a big conducting baton.
Exactly. That's what I'm.
That's the tricky part, and DeMullen's been so great with working with us with this, because it's a new garment, it's a new accessory that had to be created, and fit to each performer. So the performers,
so they're designed for what they're going to hold. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not all the same. Oh gosh, that makes sense. This has been very complex.
Yeah. They have their rehearsal backpacks that they wear every day, and they have the performance backpacks, and yeah, it's.
So if I carry a rifle around, mine's different than the person that has a flag or something else. Or gosh, this is interesting. I really would like to see one.
Yeah, and like Andy was saying, Des Moines has been fantastic because they have created, we had to have the rehearsal backpacks so that they don't fade in the sun, right? So they're not a different color than the uniform.
So does the whole Corps have like backpack tans, like stripes? I love it. It's not just the drummers with the harness. Like that's
yeah. No, the drummers have that one still, but the brass now have the backpack.
That's super cool. It's very Robin Hood.
It's so hidden and seamless, isn't it great when you find this out? You're like, oh wow, and it's so subtle. Like the carriers were powder coated the exact same color, and so every performer kind of looks the same, but then they all have different functions. It's nice.
Yeah, it's really interesting. If you guys haven't done it, you should do a video like showing all the different backpacks and how the stuff goes in there. Like I would watch that. I think that's really interesting, unless you want to keep it all proprietary, in which case don't tell me at all. I don't want to know, but I think it's very interesting, like bit of new technology that you guys created for the show that I think all of us sort of guard geeky kind of people would really like to know more about. I think it's really, really interesting. And Des Moines is probably going to sell 1,000 of them now after this. So you've started a whole new thing, I think. All right. How about we go around and ask each of you just to say one thing in closing, like just anything you want to say about the Corps, about your role, about the show, or just hey, I'm having a great time. Daniel, how about you? Anything you want to say in closing? I'm just going to give you each the opportunity to say one little thing.
Sure. I think I would just like to say that I think the Corps is absolutely on fire right now, and the next few weeks is going to be a sight to behold from these members, and I can't wait to be there in person and see it just absolutely take off.
Awesome. How about you, Evan?
Yeah, the only thing that I would really add is just obviously we've all said in our own different ways that there are a lot of layers to this show, and there's a lot of things to understand. There's certainly, by learning about what our perspective is on what has been crafted, there's certainly a lot to watch and look for. But one of the things that I personally hope for anyone that watches this show of any experience level or ages, there should be something to connect to that you enjoy to see and hear. So whatever that is, as you get to enjoy this, to everyone that does get to enjoy the show, especially live, just let whatever you want to look at or listen to, just watch or listen to that thing, and hopefully you'll be inspired by what you're seeing and hearing, and it'll make you want to clap for our performers because they're the real heroes.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, again, everybody, go see Drum Corps live. Just, it's worth it. It's worth the trouble. Make the trip. Go do it. Paul, what would you like to say?
Well, I think it's clear that the more we would just encourage everyone to be curious about the show. The more you know about the show, the more you appreciate it. And I would like to just note that we all kind of have a same philosophy of design, and that great design sometimes is seamless and sleek and very hidden behind the scenes and not so overt. I think we appreciate that because that seems to be worth multiple viewings, not just this season, but even in the future, just to see the thought that's gone behind everything is only appreciated when you just dig a little deeper and you're curious about it. But I think it's a blast. I want to just follow up on what Mike said about the performers. I mean, they're out there all the time, and everyone is having such a great time that it's such a pleasure to be a part of it, honestly.
It's awesome. Andy, how about you?
Oh, thanks. I would encourage people to see the show as many times as they can. Not only on the one night, if you're able to watch it, rewatch it, but throughout the rest of the season. The show is in constant evolution. And talking about the show today, if we were to talk about the show 3 weeks from now, there might be even more information. So I definitely encourage everyone to go see it and experience it and be able to insert yourself into that character and see what you come up with.
Yeah, it's great. Michael, I guess you're going to get the final word. What would you like to say?
I think from just a personal standpoint, when you look back on the number of shows that at least I personally have been involved in helping to design, there's milestones, there's certain shows and certain experiences and certain years that stick out as being more memorable than others. I do think that this will be a season and a show and an experience that I'll look back on very fondly, just because the whole process from beginning to end has been so enjoyable and so inspiring.
Well, thank you guys for sharing this hour with me and sharing this information. I've really enjoyed it. You're all super talented and important and impressive, and we're all so appreciative that you are giving your talents to the drum corps activity. And everybody, get out there and clap for the performers at Santa Clara this summer. And best of luck to you guys. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Marching Arts Education is the home of the Marching Roundtable podcast. We give you access to the top marching arts professionals through live webinars, podcasts, videos, interviews, and online coursework. With over 1,000 podcasts and hundreds of webinars and videos, there are hours of great professional development for you and your staff. Sign up for a membership to Marching Arts Education to get complete access to all webinars, videos, and podcasts, plus discounts on coursework. Many directors are using professional development funds through their school or boosters to make these resources available to their staff. Imagine what you could do with so many great new ideas from the top professionals in our activity. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and sign up for our newsletter to find out about the latest podcasts, webinars, and new content. Find all of this and sign up at marchingartseducation.com.